She's so naive, thinking love means handing over her fortune. I'll strip her bare and vanish with every cent. His venomous whisper slithered through the study's cracked door, gutting the heart of the black heiress and bored chairwoman. In her opulent penthouse, bathed in dawn's deceptive glow, she stood paralyzed, her trust in her husband obliterated by his vile betrayal. As a black woman navigating elite circles, she endured ceaseless slights, sneers at galas questioning her worth, boardroom eyes dismissing her authority, and whispers branding her a token. Yet her faith in love blinded her to his cunning facade. Subscribe to catch our gripping stories and share where you're watching from in the comments. Can she outsmart his despicable scheme? Will she rise above the treachery? Stay tuned for a tale of deception and her fierce reclaiming of power. The penthouse gleamed under the soft glow of dawn, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing a city skyline that shimmered with ambition. The air carried the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, mingling with the faint hum of a jazz tune drifting from a sleek speaker in the corner. She stood at the marble island, her fingers tracing the rim of a ceramic mug, the warmth seeping into her palms. Her husband, tall and impeccably dressed in a crisp white shirt, moved with practiced ease in the kitchen. His tie hung loose, a deliberate nod to casual charm, and his smile was as bright as the morning sun. He slid the mug toward her, the coffee black with 2 sugars, just as she liked it. "Morning, my muse," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, eyes crinkling with a warmth that made her heart flutter. To her, he was the embodiment of devotion, a man who remembered every detail, who made her feel like the center of his world. She, a black woman who had risen to chairwoman of her family's vast empire, was no stranger to scrutiny. In boardrooms and at galas, she faced the weight of eyes that lingered too long, assessing her worth not by her sharp mind, but by the color of her skin. Whispers followed her, some subtle, others less so, questioning how a woman like her had claimed a seat at the table. Yet here, in the sanctuary of their home, she felt untouchable. Her husband's attentiveness was her shield, his love a refuge from the world's sharp edges. Today was no ordinary day, though. In a few hours, she would walk into a law office and sign papers that would bind their lives even tighter, handing him control of her $500 million inheritance. To her, it wasn't just a transaction, it was a vow, a testament to a love that transcended wealth. "You're sure about this, aren't you?" he asked, leaning against the counter, his hazel eyes searching hers. His tone was gentle, but there was a flicker in his gaze, a hunger she mistook for concern. She smiled, her dark curls catching the light as she tilted her head. "I've never been more certain," she replied, her voice steady with conviction. "You're my husband. What's mine is ours." He chuckled, a low, warm sound, and reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Ours," he echoed, the word rolling off his tongue like a promise. "I like that." She sipped her coffee, savoring the bittersweet perfection, unaware of the storm brewing beneath his polished surface. The moment was interrupted by a soft clatter from the hallway. A young black housekeeper, her apron slightly askew, had knocked over a glass of water while dusting a shelf. The liquid pooled on the hardwood, catching the light like a tiny trembling mirror. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am," the housekeeper stammered, her eyes wide with panic as she knelt to clean the mess. The husband's smile tightened, just for a moment, before he waved a hand dismissively. "Be more careful next time," he said, his tone light but edged with something colder. "Not everyone gets to work in a place like this, you know." The housekeeper nodded, her face flushed, and scurried away. The chairwoman frowned slightly, brushing off the comment as a thoughtless slip. To her, he was still the man who held doors open and tipped generously. She didn't see the way his eyes lingered on the housekeeper's retreating figure, not with kindness, but with a quiet disdain. The phone on the counter buzzed, breaking her reverie. It was her mother, a woman whose voice carried the weight of experience and unyielding resolve. The chairwoman answered, bracing herself. "Good morning, Mom," she said, trying to inject cheer into her tone. The older woman's response was immediate, her words sharp and unyielding. "You're really going through with this, aren't you? Signing away everything your father and I built?" The chairwoman sighed, glancing at her husband, who was now flipping through his phone with an air of practiced nonchalance. "Mom, it's not signing away, it's sharing. He's my family now." Her mother's voice softened, but only slightly. "You don't have to give up everything to prove you love him. A man who truly loves you doesn't need your fortune to feel secure." The chairwoman's jaw tightened. "I know what I'm doing," she said, her words more for herself than her mother. "I have to go." She hung up, her fingers lingering on the phone as a text notification flashed across the screen. It was her best friend, a white woman with a knack for cutting through pretense. The message was blunt. "Are you sure about this? Don't let love blind you." The chairwoman's lips pressed into a thin line. She typed a quick reply. "I'm fine. I trust him," and set the phone down, ignoring the knot forming in her chest. Her husband glanced up, his smile as disarming as ever. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice dripping with concern. "Just Lily being Lily," she said with a forced laugh. "She thinks lawyers are out to trap us." He chuckled, leaning closer. "Well, she's not entirely wrong. But don't worry, love. Today's about us, not traps." His hand found hers again, and she squeezed it, clinging to the warmth of his touch, to the illusion of unity. As they prepared to leave for the law office, she moved to the bedroom to change, her reflection catching her eye in the full-length mirror. She adjusted her tailored blazer, its deep navy a stark contrast to her rich brown skin. She was a vision of poise, a woman who commanded boardrooms, yet softened in the presence of her husband's affection. But the mirror also reflected the weight she carried, the unspoken slights, the board members who questioned her decisions, the gala guests who assumed her wealth was a fluke. She shook off the thoughts, focusing on the task ahead. Today was about trust, about building a future with the man who made her feel seen. He appeared in the doorway, his tie now neatly knotted, his expression one of quiet anticipation. "You look stunning," he said, his voice low and intimate. She smiled, her heart lifting despite the doubts gnawing at her edges. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping toward him. He offered his arm, and they moved toward the elevator, the city sprawling beneath them like a glittering promise. The housekeeper passed them in the hall, her eyes lowered, and he gave her a curt nod, his smile reserved only for his wife. To the chairwoman, it was a fleeting moment, easily forgotten. To the housekeeper, it was another reminder of her place in their world, a world where she was tolerated, not welcomed. In the car, a sleek black sedan that purred through the city streets, he turned to her, his hand resting lightly on her knee. "You're doing something incredible today," he said, his tone reverent. "Not every woman would trust like this." She looked at him, her eyes searching his for any hint of insincerity, but found only the familiar warmth. "It's not about trust," she said softly. "It's about us being one." He nodded, his smile widening, and turned his attention to the road. The city blurred past, a tapestry of steel and glass, and she let herself believe in the dream they'd built together. A dream where love erased all boundaries, where her wealth was merely a tool to strengthen their bond. As they neared the law office, her phone buzzed again. Another text from her friend. "Love doesn't mean signing your life away. Call me." She silenced the phone, her resolve hardening. She was the chairwoman of a $500 million empire, a black woman who had defied every expectation to claim her place. She would not let doubt, or the world's whispered judgments, shake her faith in the man beside her. Not yet. The car pulled up to the sleek office building, and she stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement, her heart steady but her mind unaware of the cracks already forming in the perfect facade. She stepped out of the sedan, her heels clicking against the pavement, her heart steady but her mind unaware of the cracks already forming in the perfect facade. The law office loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the city's restless energy, but her husband's warm hand on hers anchored her to the moment. She pushed aside the doubts, her mother's warnings, her friend's texts, and focused on the future they'd build together. Yet as the days unfolded, those doubts would claw their way to the surface, revealing truths she wasn't ready to face. A week before the signing, the penthouse felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage. She sat at her desk, reviewing board reports, when a stray document caught her eye. A bank statement slipped between tax forms. It listed a transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands, a six-figure sum with no explanation. Her brow furrowed. She wasn't naive. Her role as chairwoman demanded financial acumen, but this was unfamiliar, unmarked, alien. She carried the paper to the living room, where her husband lounged on the leather sofa, scrolling through his phone. "Hey," she said, her tone light but probing. "What's this about? A transfer to the Caymans?" He looked up, his smile instant, disarming. "Oh, that?" He rose, crossing the room to wrap an arm around her waist. "Just a little investment for our future. A nest egg, you know." I didn't want to bore you with the details. His lips brushed her temple, and the warmth of his touch dulled her suspicion. "You're too good to me," she murmured, wanting to believe him. But the statement lingered in her mind, a pebble in her shoe she couldn't shake. That weekend they attended a charity gala in a glittering ballroom, chandeliers casting prisms across silk gowns and tailored suits. She moved through the crowd, her emerald dress hugging her frame, her presence commanding despite the whispers that trailed her. A black woman in her position was a rarity, and the elite didn't let her forget it. An older man, his face creased with privilege, leaned toward his companion, voice low but not low enough. "She's impressive, but does she really belong here?" She caught the words, her smile tightening, but she pressed on, shaking hands, charming donors. Her husband was at her side, his arm a steady anchor, his laughter a shield. "You're the star tonight," he whispered, squeezing her hand. She beamed, grateful for his support, unaware of the conversation he'd have later that night. In a quiet corner of the ballroom, as she chatted with a board member, her husband slipped away to join a group of investors. She didn't see him, but the bartender, a black man with a keen ear, did. "She's my golden ticket," her husband said, his voice low, a smirk curling his lips. "Marrying her was the best deal I ever closed." The men around him chuckled, their glasses clinking in agreement. The bartender's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes flicking toward the chairwoman across the room. She was oblivious, laughing at a donor's joke, her grace a quiet defiance of the room's judgment. The bartender's gaze lingered, a silent wish to warn her, but he turned back to his work, knowing his place in their world. Back at the penthouse, she sensed a shift, subtle but undeniable. Her husband was attentive as ever, pouring her wine, teasing her about her dance moves at the gala. But his eyes darted to his phone more often, his replies a touch too quick. She brushed it off, chalking it up to work stress. But then came the test, a moment born of instinct. Over breakfast, as he sliced an apple with surgical precision, she leaned back, her voice casual. "You know, I was going over the estate's books yesterday," she said, watching him closely. "Turns out some bad investments have eaten into the fortune. It's not what it used to be." His knife paused, just for a heartbeat, before he resumed cutting. His face remained calm, but his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of disappointment, sharp and unguarded. "Money's just numbers," he said, his smile returning too quickly. "You're what matters to me." He reached for her hand, but the warmth felt rehearsed, and for the first time, her heart stuttered. She nodded, forcing a smile, but the seed of doubt took root. The tension grew at a family dinner hosted at her mother's brownstone, a stately home filled with heirlooms and history. Her mother, a black woman whose strength had carved the family's legacy, sat at the head of the table, her eyes sharp as she watched her daughter's husband. The meal was warm, roasted chicken, collard greens, cornbread, but the air crackled with unspoken conflict. "So," her mother began, her voice cutting through the clink of silverware, "you're comfortable with my daughter handing over everything she's worked for?" The question hung heavy, the room stilling. Her husband's smile didn't waver, but his grip on his fork tightened. "It's not about taking," he said smoothly. "It's about building a life together. She trusts me, and I'm honored." His words were perfect, polished, but the chairwoman caught her mother's skeptical glance. Later, as they cleared the table, her mother pulled her aside. "A man who loves you doesn't need your empire to prove it," she said, her voice low, urgent. "You're brilliant, but love can blind even the sharpest minds." The chairwoman nodded, her throat tight, but defended him. "He's not like that, Mom. He's with me for me." That night, alone in their penthouse, she replayed the dinner, her mother's words echoing. She tried to dismiss them, but her husband's behavior gnawed at her. He'd slipped into the study after dinner, closing the door with a soft click. She heard his voice, muffled but sharp, speaking to someone on the phone. "Her mother's a problem," he said, his tone clipped. "She's too nosy, always in the way. We'll deal with her after the signing." The words were a blade slicing through her trust. She stood frozen outside the door, her breath shallow, but didn't confront him. Instead, she retreated to the bedroom, her mind racing. Was it a misunderstanding? A business call taken out of context? She wanted to believe in him, in the man who kissed her goodnight with such tenderness. But the cracks were spreading, too deep to ignore. The next morning, he was back to his charming self, brewing her coffee, humming a tune. "You're quiet today," he said, sliding the mug across the counter. "Just thinking about the signing," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm inside. He tilted his head, his smile softening. "You're doing the right thing. It's us against the world, right?" She nodded, but her eyes lingered on him, searching for the man she thought she knew. The gala, the bank statement, his words about her mother, they were fragments of a puzzle she wasn't ready to assemble. As they dressed for another day, her phone lit up with a text from her friend. "You're too smart to ignore the signs. Call me." She silenced the phone, her fingers trembling, but her resolve held firm. She was the chairwoman, a black woman who had conquered a world that tried to diminish her. She wouldn't let doubt unravel her, not yet. But as they stepped into the elevator, his hand in hers, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man she loved was hiding something, and the truth was closer than she feared. She couldn't shake the feeling that the man she loved was hiding something, and the truth was closer than she feared. As the elevator doors closed, sealing them in a cocoon of polished steel, she carried the weight of her husband's words, his cold dismissal of her mother as a problem to be dealt with. The memory clung to her like damp air, heavy and inescapable, as she moved through the days leading to the signing. Each smile he offered, each tender touch, felt like a performance she was only now beginning to question. The penthouse, once her haven, now pulsed with a quiet dread, its opulence a mocking backdrop to her growing unease. Late one night, unable to sleep, she slipped out of bed, the city's glow casting long shadows across the hardwood. Her husband slept soundly, his breathing even, his face serene in a way that now seemed unnatural. She patted down the hall, her bare feet silent against the cool floor, driven by an impulse she couldn't name. The study door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the darkness. She needed honey for her tea, a small comfort to soothe her restless mind. But as she approached, his voice stopped her cold. It was low, sharp, stripped of the warmth he reserved for her. "She'll sign," he said, the words slicing through the quiet. "After that, we move the money offshore, cut her out of the board. She thinks love means giving it all up. Pathetic." A cruel laugh followed, and her heart seized, as if the air had been sucked from the room. She pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow, her body trembling with the weight of his betrayal. The words echoed, each one a dagger. "She's so caught up in this fairy tale, she won't see it coming," he continued, his tone dripping with contempt. "By the time she figures it out, I'll have everything." Her knees buckled, but she caught herself, her nails digging into her palms. The man she trusted, the one who brewed her coffee and danced with her in the kitchen, was plotting to dismantle her life. The roses on the dining table, a gift from him just hours ago, now seemed like a cruel joke, their petals mocking her naivety. She wanted to scream, to burst through the door and confront him, but something deeper, survival, held her back. She retreated, silent as a shadow, her mind racing with the realization that her love had been a weapon in his hands. The memory of past slights flooded her. At a recent board meeting, a white executive had questioned her strategy, his tone polite but laced with condescension. "Are you sure you're equipped to handle this, given your background?" She'd brushed it off, proving her competence with numbers and vision, but the sting lingered. At a gala, a woman in pearls had remarked to her friend, loud enough for her to hear, "It's inspiring, really, how she's managed to fit in." Her husband had always been there, his arm around her, whispering, "They're just jealous, love." But now his words from the study revealed a truth she hadn't faced. He wasn't her protector. He was part of the world that saw her as less, using her love to exploit her power. She returned to the bedroom, her movements mechanical, and slid under the covers, her body inches from his. His steady breathing mocked her turmoil, a reminder of his ease and deceit. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying every moment, the way he deflected her questions about the bank statement, the flicker of disappointment when she'd tested him with talk of diminished wealth. How long had he been weaving this web? How many of his kisses were lies? The chairwoman, who had faced down boardroom battles and societal scorn, felt her heart fracture, but she refused to let it break. Tears threatened, but she swallowed them, her jaw tight. Crying wouldn't save her. Strategy would. By morning, she was resolved. She couldn't confront him. Not yet. She needed a plan, someone she could trust. Her thoughts turned to Heiress, the family lawyer, a white man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a reputation for discretion. He'd worked with her father, guiding the family through legal mazes, and had always treated her with respect, never questioning her authority as a black woman in power. She needed his counsel, but she had to be careful. Her husband was observant, his charm a mask for calculation. She waited until he left for a meeting, his briefcase in hand, his smile as flawless as ever. "I'll be back for dinner, love," he called, blowing her a kiss. She nodded, her own smile a mirror of his deception, and as the door clicked shut, she dialed Heiress. The call was brief, her voice low and urgent. "I need to see you. Today. It's about the signing." Heiress didn't hesitate. "Come to my office at noon. We'll talk privately." She hung up, her pulse racing, and dressed quickly, choosing a tailored suit that felt like armor. The city streets blurred past as she drove, her mind a storm of fear and determination. At Heiress's office, a quiet suite with mahogany walls and leather chairs, he greeted her with a nod, his expression calm but perceptive. "What's happened?" he asked, closing the door. She took a breath, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "I overheard him last night. He's planning to take everything. Move the money offshore, push me out of the company. He thinks I'm blind." Heiress's eyes narrowed, but he didn't interrupt. "I need a way to protect myself without him knowing," she continued. "I can't let him win." Heiress leaned back, his fingers steepled. "We can rewrite the documents," he said, his voice measured. "On the surface, it'll look like you're giving him control, but we'll lock the assets in a trust that requires your approval for any move. He'll think he's won, but he'll be powerless." She exhaled, relief mingling with dread. "Can we do it in time?" she asked. Heiress nodded. "We'll need to move fast, but it's possible. You'll have to play your part perfectly. Give him no reason to suspect." She met his gaze, her resolve hardening. "I can do that." As she left his office, the weight of her decision settled over her. She was no longer the woman who believed love erased all doubts. She was a strategist, a survivor, and she would fight. Back at the penthouse, she moved through the evening with calculated ease, laughing at his jokes, leaning into his touch. He cooked salmon, his apron tied with a flourish, and they ate by candlelight, the city skyline a glittering witness. "You seem lighter tonight," he said, his eyes searching hers. "Just excited for what's ahead," she lied, her smile a perfect mask. He reached for her hand, oblivious to the shift within her. She was still his wife, but now she saw him for what he was, a predator cloaked in charm. As they cleared the dishes, her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Trust your instincts, baby. You're stronger than you know." She slipped the phone into her pocket, her heart steady. The betrayal had shattered her illusions, but it had also forged something new. A resolve as unyielding as the empire she led. The betrayal had shattered her illusions, but it had also forged something new. A resolve as unyielding as the empire she led. As she slipped her phone into her pocket, the chairwoman carried her mother's words like a talisman, her heart no longer swayed by her husband's charm. The city skyline glittered beyond the penthouse windows, a silent witness to her transformation. She was no longer the woman who believed love could erase doubt. She was a strategist, poised to turn her husband's treachery against him. The signing loomed, a day that would test her ability to wear a mask as convincingly as he did. With Harris's plan in place, she was ready to weave a trap that would bind him in his own deceit. The next morning, she sat at the breakfast bar, her coffee untouched as her husband bustled around the kitchen, his movements as choreographed as a stage actor's. He hummed softly, slicing oranges with a flourish, his smile as bright as ever. "Big day tomorrow," he said, sliding a plate of fruit toward her. "You feeling ready?" His tone was warm, but she caught the glint in his eyes, a predator sizing up its prize. She nodded, her lips curving into a practiced smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," she said, her voice steady, betraying none of the fire burning within. He leaned over, kissing her forehead, and she let him, her skin prickling at the touch. Every gesture, every word was now a performance, and she matched his act with one of her own, knowing the stakes were her legacy, her power, her survival. At Harris's office later that day, the air was thick with purpose. The lawyer's suite, with its polished mahogany desk and shelves lined with leather-bound books, felt like a war room. Harris sat across from her, his glasses perched low on his nose, his expression one of quiet resolve. Beside him sat Emma, his black assistant, her sharp eyes scanning a stack of documents. Emma had been with Harris for years, her efficiency matched only by her loyalty, and the chairwoman trusted her implicitly. "We've drafted the new terms," Harris began, sliding a folder toward her. "The contract appears to grant him full control, accounts, properties, board votes, but it's a facade. A trust structure locks everything down. No funds can be moved, no decisions made, without your explicit approval." He tapped the folder, his voice steady. "He'll see what he wants to see, but he'll be powerless." Emma handed her a USB drive, her voice low but firm. "I pulled records from his recent transactions," she said. "There's more activity in those offshore accounts you mentioned. Transfers to shell companies, all tied to him. It's subtle, but it's there." The chairwoman's jaw tightened, her fingers closing around the drive. "Thank you, Emma," she said, meeting the woman's gaze. There was a shared understanding between them, unspoken but palpable. A recognition of the barriers they'd both faced in a world that often dismissed their competence. Emma nodded, a flicker of solidarity in her eyes. "I also noticed," Emma added, her tone careful, "that he asked me to stay out of a board meeting last month. Said the clients might feel uncomfortable with me there." The words landed like a stone, and the chairwoman's breath caught. It wasn't just her he was manipulating. It was anyone who didn't fit his vision of power. Harris leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "We've got enough to build a case, but the signing is our chance to lock him in. You'll need to play the devoted wife perfectly. Any hint of suspicion, and he might bolt." She nodded, her resolve steeling. "I've been playing that role for years," she said, her voice edged with bitter irony. "One more day won't kill me." Harris gave a small, approving nod. "Good. We'll have the documents ready by tomorrow. Emma will coordinate with the bank to flag any moves he tries to make after the signing." As she left the office, the USB drive felt heavy in her pocket, a tangible reminder of the evidence mounting against the man she'd once loved. The city streets pulsed with life outside, but within her, a quiet war raged. A battle to reclaim her power without losing herself. That evening, she attended another gala, this one hosted by a tech mogul in a sleek downtown venue. The room buzzed with wealth, the air thick with perfume and ambition. She wore a crimson gown, its bold hue a defiance of the whispers that followed her. As she mingled, her husband at her side, she felt the weight of eyes, some admiring, others skeptical. A white investor, his tie loosened, approached them, his smile too wide. "You've got a real gem here," he said to her husband, clapping him on the shoulder. "Turning her into your queen piece. Brilliant move." The words were meant as a jest, but they cut deep, and she caught the way her husband's eyes gleamed, his laugh a little too hearty. She smiled, playing her part, but her mind replayed Emma's words about being excluded, about being made to feel less. The investor's comment wasn't just a quip. It was a window into how her husband saw her, a piece to be played, not a partner. As the night wore on, she excused herself to the restroom, needing a moment to breathe. In the quiet of the marble-lined space, she stared at her reflection, her eyes shadowed with the weight of her discovery. The woman looking back was no longer the naive lover who believed in fairy tales. She was the chairwoman, a black woman who had built an empire against all odds, and she would not let it be stolen. Her phone buzzed, a text from her friend. "You're stronger than his lies. Don't let him fool you." She typed a quick reply. "I see him now," and returned to the gala, her smile a perfect mask. Her husband was waiting, his arm extended, but she caught a flicker of impatience in his eyes when she lingered too long with a female board member. "Everything okay?" he asked, his tone sweet but probing. "Perfect," she lied, looping her arm through his, her heart a fortress he could no longer breach. The next morning, the day of the signing, she woke early, her body tense but her mind clear. Her husband was already up, whistling as he knotted his tie, his demeanor one of barely concealed excitement. "Today's the day," he said, catching her eye in the mirror. "You ready to make us unstoppable?" She nodded, her smile soft but calculated. "Absolutely," she said, her voice warm enough to fool him. They drove to Harris's office in silence, the city a blur of steel and glass. Her heart pounded, but she kept her hands folded in her lap, her face serene. The documents were waiting, a stack of crisp pages that held her future. Harris greeted them, his expression neutral, but his eyes met hers briefly, a silent confirmation of their plan. Emma stood nearby, her presence a quiet anchor, her tablet ready to record any discrepancies. As they sat at the polished table, her husband's hand rested on hers, his touch possessive. "This is it," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "You and me. No walls between us." She smiled, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for the pen. Harris slid the first page toward her, his voice calm. "These outline the transfer of control, but with a trust structure to ensure stability." Her husband nodded, his eyes fixed on the papers, oblivious to the trap woven into the fine print. She signed, her hand steady, each stroke a step toward his downfall. He watched, his smile widening, believing he was moments from victory. But she knew the truth. The documents were her weapon, designed to protect her empire while letting him think he'd won. They left the office, his arm around her shoulders, his voice light with triumph. "You did it, love," he said, kissing her cheek. "We're a team now." She nodded, her smile unwavering, but inside she was a storm of resolve. That night he brought home lilies, her favorite, and poured wine, his laughter filling the penthouse. She played along, clinking glasses, her eyes never leaving his. The facade was perfect, but beneath it, she was ready to spring the trap. As they danced to soft jazz in the living room, her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from Emma. "Everything's in place. He suspects nothing." She slipped the phone away, her heart steady, knowing the man in her arms was dancing toward his own defeat. What did you think of the chairwoman's journey so far, navigating love, betrayal, and a world that doubts her strength? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know where you're tuning in from. We love hearing from our community. Her story is far from over, and the next chapter promises more twists as she faces the fallout of her cunning plan. Will she outsmart her husband's allies, or will new threats emerge from the shadows? Stay subscribed to catch every gripping moment of her fight to reclaim her power. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. Your support keeps these stories alive. We can't wait to bring you the next installment, so hit that notification bell and join us again soon for more drama, resilience, and triumph. Until next time, keep believing in your own strength.